Think you know Henry VIII, the guy with 6 wives and his own church? Guess again. The real Henry was less royal icon and more full-blown horror show. So bloated he had to be wheeled around by servants, so paranoid he slept next to loaded crossbows, and so rotten from the inside out that his corpse literally exploded after death. Yeah, this isn't in your history book. If you're into the side of history they try to hide, hit subscribe, because it only gets darker from here. In this deep dive, we're pulling back the curtain on England's most infamous king. From festering wounds and psychotic power plays to a death scene straight out of a horror film, this is Henry VIII stripped of the myths. Brutal, unhinged, unforgettable. By the end of his life, Henry VIII wasn't just unhealthy, he was a walking corpse. His body had become a collapsing disaster zone, and even his own servants could barely stand to be near him. At his peak, Henry's waist measured 54 inches, wider than most people are tall. He weighed around 400 pounds in a time when the average man barely hit 140. But this wasn't just a case of royal overindulgence. His legs were covered in gaping ulcers that never healed. These wounds oozed pus, reeked of rotting flesh, and were so painful he could barely stand. The smell? Reportedly strong enough to choke a horse. Courtiers held perfumed cloths over their faces just to approach him. Servants drew straws to decide who had to dress him, because getting near his infected body was considered a punishment. In 1536, Henry suffered a serious jousting accident. He was knocked unconscious for 2 hours, long enough that many thought he'd died. When he woke up, something had changed. Modern doctors believe that brain injury may have triggered a sharp shift in his personality. The once promising young ruler morphed into a paranoid, violent wreck of a man. And that wasn't all. Historians now think Henry may have had Cushing's syndrome, a rare hormonal disorder that explains a lot. The weight gain, the rage, the unhealing wounds, the mental spiral. But here's the catch. His doctors were too terrified to tell him he was sick, suggesting the king wasn't in perfect health? That was treason. In his final years, Henry was hauled around in custom-built chairs and pulleys like a sack of spoiled meat. He couldn't control his bladder. Attendants had to carry special seats just in case he had an accident mid-journey. Everyone knows Henry VIII had 6 wives and chopped off a couple of their heads. But what you don't hear is how far the psychological torture went, or how truly terrifying it was to be married to a man like him. Beheading was often the merciful part. Anne didn't just fall out of favor, she was set up. Henry had her accused of adultery, incest, and treason, all based on confessions ripped out of people under torture. One of those men? Her own brother. But here's the truly twisted part. Before her execution, Henry made her watch 5 innocent men be publicly killed, including that same brother. Imagine standing there, knowing your turn was next, while your husband turns your death into theater. Catherine was barely out of her teens when Henry married her. When he found out she'd had previous relationships, he lost it. He passed a brand new law making it treason to marry the king without disclosing your sexual history. In other words, he rewrote the rules just to justify killing her. Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, spent her last years in isolation, banned from seeing her daughter. Henry spread rumors that she was mentally unstable. She died alone, writing desperate letters to a man who never read them. Anne of Cleves. She saw what was coming. After their arranged marriage flopped, she agreed to a fake annulment, pretended the wedding never happened, and thanked him for the honor of not being killed. And Jane Seymour, the so-called lucky one who died of natural causes? She died giving birth to Henry's son. He was already planning wife number 4 9 days after her funeral. These women weren't just queens, they were hostages. And resisting didn't just put you in danger, it could take down your entire family. If you think modern-day eating contests are wild, wait until you meet Henry VIII's daily menu. Henry consumed around 5,000 calories a day, and that's a conservative estimate. His appetite wasn't just big, It was terrifying. Here's where it gets weird. Henry believed certain foods had supernatural powers. He thought eating swan would make him more elegant. That venison made him a better hunter. That oysters boosted his bedroom skills. So he didn't just eat for pleasure, he gorged for power. Because Henry was terrified of being poisoned, every single bite had to be tasted by multiple servants first. And not just tasted. Those food tasters had to wait 30 minutes before he'd touch anything, just to see if they dropped dead first. Even as his legs oozed pus and his body collapsed under its own weight, Henry kept eating. He believed, in the most delusional royal way possible, that he was too powerful to die from something as mundane as his own diet. Spoiler, he wasn't. Henry didn't sleep like a king. He slept like a man expecting to be murdered. He kept loaded crossbows beside his bed, multiple daggers under his pillow. Armed guards stood watch inside his room while he slept, because locking the door wasn't enough. He needed witnesses in case someone tried to kill him in his sleep. That's how much he trusted no one. In his final weeks, Henry was so massive and immobile that servants had to cart him around using a custom-built chair with wheels and pulleys. And it wasn't just about weight. His legs were so infected that chunks of dead flesh would literally fall off his body as they moved him from room to room. When Henry finally died, his body started decomposing immediately. It bloated. It stank. His skin stretched tight from the gases building up inside him. The smell was so bad that even his doctors, people used to medieval medical horrors, had to leave the room to vomit. No one wanted to go near him. No one wanted to confirm he was actually dead. To contain the mess, they wrapped his body in lead sheets and sealed it inside multiple reinforced coffins. But that wasn't enough. On the journey to Windsor Castle for his burial, his corpse exploded. The internal gases built up so much pressure that the lead lining burst open, spraying rotten royal remains all over the inside of the hearse. The stench was so unbearable that the funeral procession had to stop while servants scrubbed the mess off the road with buckets and rags. And yes, this part is real. Dogs were seen licking up the leaked fluids from the pavement. When they finally got him to the tomb, his coffin was so massive they had to dig an extra-wide grave. But the ground kept collapsing under the weight of the lead and decaying flesh. It took several tries just to get his remains underground. And it didn't stop there. For years after, people reported strange noises and horrific smells coming from his tomb. Some said it was his ghost. Historians think it was probably just more gas escaping from his slowly decomposing body. Several servants who handled his corpse died within weeks, likely from infections picked up while dealing with the toxic mess of his remains. So no, Henry VIII didn't go out like a king. He went out like a bloated, rotting warning sign of what absolute power and zero accountability can do to a man. Forget the portraits, forget the pageantry. The real Henry VIII wasn't just a larger-than-life king. He was a full-on human disaster, a tyrant rotting from the inside out, terrorizing his kingdom with paranoia, gluttony, and unchecked power. He destroyed lives for fun, turned his court into a surveillance maze, ate like he was immortal, and died in a pool of his own decay, so bloated and broken that his body literally blew itself apart. His legacy isn't just a new church or 6 doomed marriages. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when no one dares say no to a king. Absolute power didn't just corrupt Henry, it devoured him. And if you thought this was the worst history had to offer, trust me, you haven't heard anything yet.